Well, today marks the 40th anniversary of the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Now, this has been touted as the most widely embraced nuclear agreement in history, but has it been a true success or a failure in some ways? Here to discuss it is Ivan Eland, Senior Fellow at the Independent Institute. Now, Mr. Eland, this compromises by nature are imperfect. In many ways, they stop the spread of nuclear weapons, but at the same time, we now know that, countries have pulled out. Pakistan, India, and are believed to have nuclear weapons, and Israel has never signed this and won't confirm or deny whether they have nuclear weapons. So what do you think? Has it been a success or a failure?
Well, I think it has slowed the progress toward nuclear weapons. We've had countries that have done away with their nuclear programs, like South Africa, et cetera. So there has been some successes and some failures, but over time it's probably slowed down the process, and maybe that's all you can ask for. Probably the whole treaty mechanism probably needs to be redone, but that's very difficult to do in international affairs, to rip up everything and start over. Now, you'd also have countries like North Korea and Iran, which violated it, and of course North Korea pulled out of the agreement more recently. So in addition to the countries that you mentioned, there have been errant countries, and countries will do what's in their unilateral interest. The other problem that you have is that the major powers have committed to go to zero, down to zero, and of course that's never going to happen, because if they would go down to zero, then you have a country like Iran or North Korea that hides a weapon, and then they have a tremendous advantage. So now, of course, the conventional arsenals are becoming much more powerful, and some people in the United States say, well, we can definitely reduce the amount of weapons even if we don't go to zero, and I think that's where Russia and the United States are headed here, and I think hopefully they'll reduce some of these stockpiles, because it matters. They have 20,000 warheads still between them, and the Cold War is long over with, and a lot of these, they can be stolen, they can be lost, whatever, and so and of course they can also be fired at each other, although that's a lot less likely, thank God, since the Cold War is over. But having fewer weapons is good. Whether they'll be able to go to zero, probably not.
Well, and another loophole is that this allows nuclear development of energy for, scientific purposes, which makes it kind of hard to discern what a country's intentions are. People can't tell if Iran is developing nuclear reactors to power hospitals or if they're developing a weapon.
Right, exactly. They can go along and do the most critical thing is enriching the actual uranium, and they can start doing that peacefully, and all they have to do is raise it to a higher level. So the most critical technological thing that they need to do is not warhead design or whatever, it's getting all these centrifuges, which is what Iran is doing now, and North Korea may have also done it, although they have they have two programs going, a plutonium and a uranium enrichment program, but you can do a lot in the peaceful realm, and then you don't know what's happening. The other problem is that the United States, under the Atoms for Peace program under the Eisenhower administration, was big on nuclear power, and so we gave a lot of the technology to a lot of countries that are now using it for nuclear weapons and that sort of thing.
And really quickly, we don't have a lot of time, but of course everyone has been watching Iran and watching what's going on with their nuclear capabilities. But meanwhile, Defense Minister of Israel just last week said that he doesn't think that Iran would be crazy enough to ever really launch a nuclear bomb. So is this attention even merited?
Well, I think people understate Israel's ability to respond. They probably have 200 to 400 nuclear weapons, although they don't say that they even have nuclear weapons. Everyone knows they do, and I think they have dominance. So I think Iran would be foolish, and I think we're going to have to realize that Iran is probably eventually going to get nuclear weapons, because it's in a rough neighborhood, and because even if the regime was overthrown, there's a widespread popular support for the nuclear program in Iran. So a change of regime might not even help. And they've probably buried most of that stuff after the Israeli strike on the Iraqi reactor in Osirak in 1981. So if they haven't buried a lot of the stuff, they've been very foolish. And Iran has never seemed to be very foolish. So, but I think the threat can be overstated, and I think that's the main thing, is if they get a few warheads. The United States has thousands of warheads, and so does Russia. They can be deterred, and they have Maoist China in the 60s was very radical, and there was a lot of worry at the time, just like in Iran, that they might be irrational. But of course, they didn't, because we had thousands of warheads, and so does Russia.
All right, and it certainly will continue to be something that we're following. Thank you for weighing in and giving us your insight.